Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Whalen. This is episode number 54. Along with me always is my partner in crime, Jerry Calla. Jerry, how you doing today?
Excellent, Jimmy.
All right. So our next guest played for St. John's. Obviously, you could see with his shirt. He wrote a memoir, The Last Redman, back in 2018. He has an interesting basketball career, and I just finished reading his book, and it just talks a lot about perseverance and also a good Father's Day gift. So it's our pleasure to introduce number 31, Bill, number 31. So it's an inside joke on that. So Bill Mitaritonna. So I know you pictured your last name, Bill. So, but I found it poignant that Bob Shepard could say your name too. I didn't realize that he did the St. John's games as well. We just dive into that story.
Thanks, guys, for having me. This is wonderful. I appreciate it. My story, starting from growing up in Rosedale, Queens, being a big St. John's fan, was always a dream of mine. When I was 12 years old, the great St. John's players were Chris Mullin, Mark Jackson, Willie Glass, Walter Berry, Bill Wennington, and that Final Four team. And I think there's a generation of us in our 50s, walking around New York right now and other parts of the tri-state area that fell in love with basketball because of Chris Mullin and that team, Louis Carnesecca. And, it was always my dream to play at St. John's. I was a decent CYO player growing up. I wasn't a great player, but just the way that I got to St. John's was a little bit unorthodox, to say the least.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll just delve into your background. Like you said, you grew up in Rosedale, Queens. Obviously we're around the same age. So CYO basketball was it, you played against the neighborhood, you played against different parishes, you learned basketball on the playground. And your father was also a big influence of you, Angelo. I guess he played at, how do you say, Aramus High School and Erasmus High School. So he went out to Utah. Actually, I think Doug Moe, you mentioned, was a classmate of his at Erasmus, and then he ended up finishing down in Mississippi at a smaller school. Yeah. And then he ended up playing for the Washington Generals, which I thought was pretty unique. But he did deeply influence, and I think when we first talked on the phone and exchanged emails, like that 85 team, we had Willie Glass on the show. Yeah. So that really, that was Big East basketball at the best. So, so just take us a little bit about your background growing up and your father's influence on you. And your dad actually inspired you to write the book back in, I guess, in 2008. He said,
Yep. So he was a big influence. My mom and dad didn't have a lot of money, like a lot of us in the neighborhood that I grew up in, Queens. Very working class. My dad was a cab driver. My mom was a disabled nurse. So she stopped working, and we didn't have a lot of money. But what we did have was a backyard. So I learned the game from my dad, Angelo, in my backyard. And you know what? Like all of us, I think, we listen to our parents, but we're like, we can do it ourselves the right way. And I didn't really do a great job of listening to him all that much when I was really young. Like, he was trying to teach me how to shoot. My dad was he said he was the first jump shooter in Brooklyn history. Everybody used to shoot with two hands. He said he was the first jump shooter with one hand. And I was like, no, that's not how you do it. And I didn't listen to him. So he ended up becoming my baseball coach in Little League and my CYO basketball coach. And he was the best. I mean, everybody played the same amount. It didn't matter if we won or lost. He wanted everybody to enjoy the experience because he had that background. Like you said, Jimmy, he talked about, playing against Bill Russell in the NCAA tournament, and 2 years later playing against Wilt Chamberlain on the Globetrotters. Like, he played against two of the greatest players of the 50s and 60s. He knew the game better than anyone. And I didn't do a great job of listening to him, but I did as I got older. But we all kind of have that relationship with our parents, I guess, at one point or another. So I decide that because of that St. John's team, I want to go to the best high school in Queens. And the best high school for basketball in Queens was Archbishop Malloy. And my parents were very Catholic, and they didn't want me to go to public school. They wanted me to go to Catholic school. And in 1986, Archbishop Malloy was the number one team in the country. And in the 86-87 season, and they were led by Kenny Anderson, who was a year older than me at Malloy. He was the greatest basketball player in high school I've ever seen. They had Robert Ann, who played at St. John's eventually, who was 6'11", and they had a guy named Ralph James, who ended up playing 4 years at Harvard, who was this great basketball player. And of course, they were coached by Jack Curran, who is the all-time winningest leader in basketball, New York State history, in baseball wins and basketball wins. So I wanted to go to the best. And I went to freshman tryouts. There were 80 kids there. Malloy was an all-boys school back then. And I got cut from the team. And I didn't know why. And my father was like, well, let me help you through that process. I can help you. And he tried to give me some pointers. I kind of listened to him a little bit more as we got older. But I didn't like being cut my freshman year. So it pushed me to want to make the JV team because I really wanted to play, for Malloy. They were getting crowds like you couldn't believe. Every college coach in America was there to see Kenny Anderson, Bobby Cremins, Dean Smith, Jim Boeheim, you name it. Everybody was coming to our gym to see us play. And I really got better. I got a little bit taller for that JV year. I thought I was going to make the team. I probably should have made the team in retrospect, but I got cut again. And it was devastating. And I came home from school that day. I'll never forget. My mom was in the living room waiting for me. And I just ran right upstairs and went and cried. And my dad came home from work and he said something extremely important to me. And I don't know if I would have handled it the same way. I probably wouldn't have. My dad was such a positive guy. He goes, look, Billy, you've really improved from your freshman and sophomore year. Not only do I think you're going to play for Malloy one day, I think you're going to play in college one day. And I went, what are you talking about? You just don't play at Malloy varsity after being cut your freshman and sophomore year. And now I look back, I was like, he did believe in me. And that was his way of teaching. His teaching was being a positive influence, giving you confidence, and teaching, perseverance, that failure can be a positive motivator down the road. And I think, that putting that into me at such an early age made me so competitive at everything I do in life, whether I'm a social studies teacher or basketball coach, or I'm playing fantasy football with my high school buddies. I want to beat everyone, but because I want to prove to them, I had that chip on my shoulder and I wanted to prove to everybody that I wasn't, like a failure.
And Archbishop Malloy, I know like Bobby Crimmins said the reason why he went after Kenny Anderson says that Jack Curran played him as a freshman. He never played freshman. So that was one of those things. And we also, John Dunn was also the head coach of St. Peter's. He was on that team. So I think I went to a Division III school and one of my friends was from the Bronx, went to Mount St. Michael. He had a tape of that game, Talentine High School versus Archbishop Malloy. Yep. And then that with Malik Sealy and now Adrian Red Autry, who was at Syracuse coach. I mean, that was probably one of the best high school basketball games that I ever saw. But I'll pass it along to Jerry. Jerry grew up with the Hurleys, so he'll probably go tit for tat for you with that. So
good.
Well, first, Billy, welcome to the program. I gotta be honest with you. Maybe Jimmy could correct me if I'm wrong. We've had Super Bowl champs, Big East legends, authors, historians, and you're probably the first guy that we've had on in our 50-plus episodes that they really should either do a 30 for 30 or make a movie about your life, because it is one interesting tale. And before we end there, I just want to say, you being a Queens, Long Island guy, I would love to be an extra when you get that movie going. I think you're going to have, maybe not for Jimmy, you'll definitely have room for another Italian. But again, you're talking about why it's a special story is, and I definitely can relate to your story, is there is nothing, and I always say this, unless you experienced it firsthand in the 80s, there was nothing in the tri-state area like CYO basketball growing up. And I think it's hard to explain to people that never went through that. You had that parish pride. There was nothing like that. And the funny thing is, my CYO basketball coach, I had the pleasure of playing for the same gentleman for baseball and basketball. And he was so enamored with St. John's. Our grammar school was Our Lady of Mercy. And he nicknamed us the Redmen after St. John's. And it killed him because I was a diehard Georgetown fan. So I had to get that out there. But I mean, can you, like, now you're coaching high school basketball, right? So you're coaching high school basketball in an era where there's really no strong CYO programs. So can you tell me, like, can you explain to me, like, would you have liked to coach back then, so to speak, when the CYO circuit was the CYO circuit?
The CYO, you're right, Jerry. It was a special time. Like, we didn't have anything else. It was October, the end of October, right around Halloween, and maybe you got to March if you made it to the playoffs. So that was it. There were no AAU teams. There were no travel teams. There were 3 AAU teams, I think, probably by the late 80s. You had the Riverside Church, you had the Gauchos, and then maybe the Long Island Lightning started maybe later in the 90s. There was nothing else. So for us to go play CYO, it meant everything. So I played CYO basketball in Nassau County. Rosedale was on the Nassau Queens border. And my church in Rosedale didn't have a basketball gym. So I was allowed to go play for a neighboring town. So I went into Hewlett, which is in the 5 towns of Long Island. And I played at the same CYO parish as Ed Burns, the actor, the
filmmaker, sure.
Filmmaker. And Eddie's dad ran the parish and the parish program. And they got my dad right in as a coach. And then I was able to play for St. Joseph's of Hewlett. If I didn't have St. Joseph Hewlett in high school, I wouldn't have been able to play anywhere because I got cut from the team. If you get cut from the team, you can play in the senior league for CYO. My junior year at St. Joe's, we won the whole Long Island. All the guys that got cut from Chaminade High School and Malloy played on the same team. And if we play at any other high school, we're on the varsity, but we all got cut. And we had 2 great coaches, Mr. Moore and Mr. Dawkins, and they brought us all over Long Island, and we played everyone and we beat everyone. And if it wasn't for CYO at St. Joseph's, I don't have that way of getting better because there weren't any leagues. You know, today with AAU basketball, if a kid gets cut from an AAU team, they can create another AAU team for them. And there's 14,000 Lightning programs. And God bless them, they're doing a good job, but that would not – I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. I love playing for one team with guys that you've been playing with for 10 or 12 years. You went all the way through senior year of high school. And again, if I don't have that, I probably don't play college basketball because it gave me a chance to compete and use the skills that I learned and play in that league.
And just going back to your Malloy days, I went to high school with the Maris brothers too, so I think we're sisters brothers. So I guess our blessed Marshall and Champagne. I didn't know who that was.
Right.
So we said that. Said that every day. We didn't know who that was. Right. Yeah. So blessed Marshall and Champagne. But what your experience with you became a manager at Malloy, and you had a front row seat to Jack Curran, and just his coaching. I think it kind of gave you some experience later on. So what was it like when you became a basketball manager? And most kids, and I have to give you credit, so most kids, if they got cut, they'd say, you know what, the hell with you guys, I'm going to do something else, the basketball team. But I think that you realize the passion for the game, and that's why when I started out the episode, just the persistence of the love of basketball and the love of being around the game, which I think that is important. Even though you didn't play, you were still around the game. But just talk a little bit your time on the court, but not participating on the team.
That's a great point, Jim, because I didn't realize I was getting a coaching internship with Coach Curran when I was a manager. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. He hired me in the fall of my junior year, and I tried out, and I got cut. And he said, well, Billy, I need a manager. Would you like to do it? And I said, yes, I'd love to do it. He goes, well, for the next couple of days, there's going to be a lot of coaches calling. So Dean Smith, Bobby Cremens, Jimmy Boeheim, you name it, Mike Krzyzewski were called. So I was in charge of Coach Curran's phones, and I was taking messages from Kenny Smith. Called one day when he just got drafted by Sacramento, and he called and he goes, I want to talk to Coach Curran. I was like, wow, I'm talking to an NBA player. Yeah. So from that perspective, I'm now talking to NBA players and fantastic coaches.
Secondly, and not to cut, Kenny Smith did go to Malloy, right? He hit it. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So Kenny was very close to Coach. And so then I become the manager, and this is Kenny Anderson's senior year. So Kenny is the number 1 player in the country. And he was, believe me, we played everyone. We went down to Myrtle Beach and played in the best tournament, the Beach Ball Classic down there. He beat Jimmy Jackson, Grant Hill in the same tournament, and it wasn't close. We went to St. Louis on a trip. I was the statistician. I was the manager. I met a great man from USA Today named Dave Kreider. Dave Kreider did the USA Today Top 25. He would call my house every Sunday morning for the New York City sports scene. Bryce the King, Malloy. He was asking me about Bobby Hurley's team in Jersey. I didn't know anything about Coach Hurley, who I absolutely love, by the way. But he would ask me for the scores and who did well and who played well. And Malloy was in the top 5. Christ the King was number 1 that year. And I'm doing, work that you would never let a junior in high school do today. I mean, he's talking to USA Today as a statistician. I counted every one of Kenny Anderson's 2,600 points, by the way. I went back to all 4 years of his books. I did it 3 times. So I think he had 26-21. That's the number he had, which is insane. For a kid to have 1,000 points in high school is an amazing accomplishment. He had 2,600. And like you said earlier, Jim, Coach Curran wouldn't play him in the first quarter of any games while he was a freshman. And John Dunn will tell you the same thing. He came off the bench as a freshman who was New York City Player of the Year as a freshman. And then he was a senior. He was the best player in the country. He was Gatorade All-American. It was just an amazing talent. So I'm sitting there getting a mentorship from Coach Curran, how to run a practice, time management during games. I'm doing the scorebook, so I know exactly who's the better players. I feel like I'm a and this is like a closet thing for me to do, but I love that time period in New York City basketball. From 1986 to 1991, there are so many Division I players. And my year of 1990, which we'll get to in a couple minutes, had the best talent ever, even though Kenny had graduated. It was stacked with people that played at big Division I schools. And I was just lucky to be a part of it. And Coach Curran was really nice to me. He was tough on me at times, but he was really nice to let me into that inner sanctum. At the end of games, I sat in the coach's office with the coaches. So when the college coaches came in to talk to Kenny, I was right there with them. And it really helped me later on in the recruitment of some of my good players as we went on.
Now again, so now that was Kenny Anderson graduated
in 1989.
89. So now that brings you to 1990.
Right.
And now what happened? What's different in what happens for you in 1990?
So I grew 5 inches. I went from like 5'10" to like 6'3", which I am today. Maybe went from 5, not whatever, but I grew 5 inches. And I started playing in summer leagues. I played down in Rockaway Beach. I don't know if you guys know Rockaway Beach. There's a great summer league down there called the St. Francis de Sales Summer Classic. And I got into the league and I played against some of the greatest talent in Queens. And I did well. And then I got confident. And then I played at Jack Curran's camp that summer and I became an all-star. And Coach Curran was kind of shocked that I made the all-star team for that week. And I got confident. And then I went to tryouts and I went into Coach's office right before tryouts started. I said, Coach, I want to be a part of the team this year. I think I've improved. I've gotten bigger. I've gotten stronger. And he said, Billy, I can't use you. You're a guard. And I got 5 Division I guards on my team. And that's exactly what he said to me. He said, I can't use you. And I think you're more valuable to me as my manager. And I was heartbroken because I thought that would be my way of kind of getting in with Coach Curran. He really had a soft spot for people that he liked. And he did like me, but he needed me in a different capacity. But he said, I'll let you practice with the team every day. So I said, all right. Again, I didn't make the team. I got cut. We practiced it. We tried out at Queens College. I don't know if you know anything about Queens College. It's the biggest facility in Queens. It's enormous. He ran us, and I just didn't make the team, whatever. But I became the manager, and he let me practice. And he didn't take a big lineup that year. He only took 11 guys. So he actually needed me in practice every day. So I showed up every day, and I guarded the best guard on our team, which is a guy named Stephen Frazier, who ended up playing 4 years at Miami. Stephen was a junior. And him and 3 other guards all played Division I. Stephen played at Miami. John Mavrukis, big strong guard, played at Hofstra. Jeremy Livingston played at Jacksonville, and Jason Gilliam played at Rhode Island. I mean, these are the 4 junior guards that were ahead of me. And I got to admit, they were all better than me. But could I have been that 12th player on the team? Could I have been that walk-on, so to speak, at the end of the bench? I definitely deserve to be on the team. I get why Coach Curran needed me as the manager because these kids were all being recruited. My best friend was a senior that year. Pat Cosgrove was 6'8". He ended up playing at Hofstra. His recruitment was getting pretty heavy. So we went down to Myrtle Beach again. We won that tournament again. Nobody thought we beat Grant Hill in that tournament. My best friend got MVP over Grant Hill and got that scholarship to Hofstra because of it. Coach Curran did a great job. He would call anybody. It didn't matter. If you were on another team and you needed a hookup for a college, he would hook up kids from the whole Catholic League. And he had so much gravitas that people understood that he knew what he was talking about. But I was that person that fell through the cracks. I never made the team before that. And I practiced against Steven every day. And we finished the season. We lost. We lost to one of my best friends from St. John's, Sean L. Scott. He played at All Hallows. We lost to All Hallows. And that was it. And the season was over. And I really had no direction. I didn't know what I was going to go to state. I was going to go to SUNY Plattsburgh, try out for the team there, maybe make it, it was a state school. It was cheap. I could afford it, but I had no direction at that point in the spring of 90.
And Hofstra, was that Jay Wright's? Was he at Hofstra?
Before Jay got there, it was a guy named Butch Van Bredikoff, who was an NBA legend. And Butch was the coach at Hofstra.
Yeah. Yep. So ironically enough, you did play in college, and I guess the coach that found you, Coach Graffam,
yes,
it was up in Portland, Maine,
right.
Westbrook College. So it's an interesting story. I don't want to take your thunder away, but just talk a little bit about how you got discovered basically on a playground. I mean, you're not the first person to have, but like back then, coaches actually had a scout, right, like where the competition was.
So going back to that St. Francis de Sales League, I played in that summer league again because I just love basketball. I love playing. All of my friends were in that league. It was a great way to compete against each other. And there was a coach, a young coach in that league named Charlie Marquardt. Charlie Marquardt played basketball for Coach Graffam at St. Joseph's College in Maine in the early 80s, and said, and Coach Graffam was just hired as the athletic director and head basketball coach at Westbrook College in Portland, Maine. So it's a small Division III school. It was all girls for 150 years until 1990, and then they wanted to bring boys in, so they had. I know, it's hysterical. I went from an all-boys high school to basically an all-girls college. So I go and play it. Now this is it's the second week of July. I've already graduated Malloy. I'm going to go to Plattsburgh, and I'm supposed to work on a Tuesday night. And one of my good friends, Joe Grimple's like, I heard you chickening out. I heard you going to work instead of playing me. And I'm like, I hung up with him. I called work. I said, I got to switch. My buddy Wade was where I go, Wade, switch with me. I got to be somewhere tonight. He's like, you got it. I covered you. I showed up to that game and I wanted to beat him so bad because going back to that competitive nature. And there was a play at the end of that game where I went up for a layup. I got fouled. They didn't, and that's that league, that schoolyard league, they didn't call anything. You go up, you get fouled, you better get your own rebound. And I did it 6 times. And on the 6th time it went in and I got fouled and I put the foul shot in. Well, as it seems, Charlie Marquardt is standing next to Coach Graffam, who's recruiting for Westbrook College, watching me play. The game is over and they grab me right away out of anyone on the court. And Coach Graffam says, hey, Billy, I'm Coach Graffam from Westbrook College in Portland, Maine. You're going to play for me next year. And I was looking around. I was like, who are you talking to? You're talking to me? Yeah. And he said, yeah, Billy, that play at the end, it showed heart and grit and perseverance. And where'd you go to high school? I said, Archbishop Malloy. He goes, oh, what a great school. He never asked me if I played there. I just said I went to Archbishop Malloy. And Charlie was there, and Charlie facilitated the whole thing. Charlie ended up being the head coach at Malloy College on Long Island for 30 years. So this is another guy who knew the game. And Coach Graffam gave me this brochure. He's like, you're coming up to Maine. I'm recruiting 3 other guys in the league. We're coming up for a visit next week. You're coming with them. Imagine my life if I go to work that night. My mother was giving me a hard time. She's like, you better go to work. You need money for college. I go, Ma, I got to play this game. I can't. Imagine I don't go to that game. My entire life changes. Coach Graffam, just to show you how close he is to me to this day, he just came to the Big East tournament and stayed with me for 5 days as we went to the Big East tournament this past March. I mean, and we sat and we laughed and we broke down basketball, and he's helping with me in my high school team. And when I went up there, when I tell you it was the best 2 years of my life, I'm not understating it. I went up to Maine and played with 3 other New York guys, Paul Peterson, Sean O'Rourke, and Beanie Soto, all guys from that summer league, and met the 8 or 9 greatest guys from New England you've ever met in your life. We were all in the same boat. We were the guys that nobody wanted. And we went up there freshman year, and I started my freshman year as the small forward. I've only started in a CYO game, and I ended up playing pretty well. We had a great year. We were 13-13 as freshmen, all freshmen. We got our heads beat in some games, but at the end of the year, we were playing well. And Coach Graffam was the most positive, energetic, a former military guy. He ran us into the ground. Just to give you an example of something we had to do, we had to run 2 miles in under 12 minutes and 30 seconds to make the team. I think the first time I ran it in 16 minutes. Like half the team didn't get it. By the end of the 2 weeks of our conditioning program, I ran it in like 12:20. I got there. But that was some of the things he instilled in us, that, you're going to work so hard that it's going to translate onto the court. And in games where it's close, it's going to work out that we're going to get this win. And he was right. At the end of our freshman year, everyone was bought in. I played with the greatest guys on the planet. We're all still friends to this day. And going from Rosedale, Queens, and you guys remember what New York City was like in the 80s, the tri-state area was like in the late 80s. It was crime everywhere. For me to go up to Portland, Maine, and have just peace, it was just peaceful. It was just no more subway to Malloy, no more taking a city bus. You walked across campus, you played basketball, you went to school, you had the best experience of your life. Westbrook was awesome.
Yeah, I went up to Portland, Maine for vacation. It's a nice town. I mean, you go for a long weekend there. It's a beautiful town. Drug problem there, though. They had a lot of heroin problems up there. But
really?
Yeah, like a block away. But it's a nice town. Not that they bother you. I guess coming from our area, you're kind of used to it. But I guess for up there, it's a little bit different. But I'll pass it along to Jerry, because then after 2 years there, you come back to St. John's, because obviously your mom, you mentioned before, was ill, and then your father had to get surgery, so you transferred back to St. John's. So Jerry, I'll pass it along to you if you ask the next question.
Yeah, so after your 2 years, like Jimmy said, you come back, you're with the Redmen, and now how does that all play out? So you come in after, so you basically have 2 years of eligibility left.
So I thought when I went in to see Coach Graffam to tell him that I had a transfer, because my mom and dad both had to have surgeries in the month of October of 1992. There's no way I could have come back. They were literally out of commission for 2 months. My sister was a senior at St. Francis Prep. She was a good basketball player and volleyball player. So I had to drive her to school. St. Francis Prep is a couple of miles from St. John's. I drive her to school, go to St. John's, go to class, go to Winthrop Hospital in Mineola, and then head home and make sure she got dinner or whatever. And I did that for the whole first half of my junior year. So then at the end of the basketball season at St. John's, I started playing pickup game. I started getting back in the I thought my career was over. When I went in to see Coach Graffam, I said, Coach, what am I going to do? And he said, Billy, go be a manager at St. John's. Go help the team out. Be a part of the game like you did at Malloy. And I was like, all right. So at the end of my junior year, I started, I knew some of the guys on the team. I knew Sean L. Scott from All Hallows. I knew Carl Beckett from Christ the King. And I got friendly with some of these guys in class. And they said, well, why don't you come down to one of our workouts? We always need help in practice. So I started helping the guys out. And that was a great team. That St. John's team was Brian Mahoney's first year in the 92-93 season. They came in second to Seton Hall. Seton Hall was great. Terry DeHare, Jerry Walker, they were a great team. They were in first place. And we got to the second round of tournament, lost to the eventual 94 champions, Arkansas, which was Corliss Williamson and Scott Thurman. They were excellent. So we lost to them. And then after the season was over, I started playing pickup games at St. John's with the players. They needed some bodies, and I would play with them. And I held my own. But you know what I learned that junior year? I didn't have a lot to do, so I started lifting. I started lifting weights. And I never lifted before 20 years old. And I started getting into the weight room and falling in love with it. So I learned very quickly that to play against these guys who were huge and fast, you have to do something different. So I became a strong rebounder. And in those practices, I could box out anybody. I could guard anybody in the post, even though I was 6'3". And I learned that up in Maine. So the following fall in my senior year, they start playing pickup games. And the guys like, Bill, come on down. So I started playing with them. And I was holding my own. I wasn't scoring. I could guard a couple of the guys on their team. And I was guarded, I'll give you an example, Sergio Luke, who was ends up being my roommate. Sergio Luke was a 6'9" three-point shooter who was from Spain. His dad was a coach over in the EuroLeague, and he came over here to play in the United States and go to college. And I could guard Sergio because he wasn't fast. All he did was shoot the three. So I could guard Sergio in practice. And it turns out in the preseason, in the 93-94 season, 4 St. John's scholarship players got hurt in the conditioning program. So I talked to the administrative assistant at St. John's, Alex Evans, who was always a good young up-and-coming coach. And I had a relationship with Alex. And I go, Alex, what about me being a walk-on this year? What do you think? He's like, well, Bill, that might actually work out. We're going to need bodies. We only have 8 healthy players right now. So Alex brought me down, and I met with Coach Mahoney, who I had a relationship from the year before. And I said, all right, Bill, come down to the first day of tryouts. We'll give you a look. We'll see if you fit in with the team. It was me and another guy who played college before, a guy named Brad Small, and we both came down. Brad actually played at Syracuse his freshman year. He was the first person to play on 2 Big East teams as a walk-on or scholarship ever in the history of the conference. So Brad and I came down to that practice, and we held our own. We helped them practice. We made 10. They couldn't even go up and down if we weren't there. And it was just good luck that I was a practice player. And then after that practice player, the guys didn't get healthy. The first games were coming around. They had 8 scholarship players, maybe 9 scholarship players. So Coach Mahoney came up to me and Bradley and said, you know what, you guys are really well-liked by the team. You fit in nicely. We're going to give you a uniform for the season. What do you think about that? I went, oh, my God, are you crazy? Yes, where do I sign up? Yeah. And Brian Mahoney, to this day, who I just saw recently, is the kindest, most generous sweetheart of a human being you will ever meet in your life. What he did for me is open up doors that are still opening up. That's what he did by putting me on a team as a walk-on. I tell him every time you see him, he's, oh, Billy, you got to stop doing that. I go, Coach, you have no idea how many doors you've opened up by me able to wear this shirt and say I played for St. John's. Like I get goosebumps thinking about it. And he kind of got a raw deal. He was maligned a little bit because he didn't win. That's nonsense. As a coach, you can't find a better person than Brian Mahoney. And everybody says the same thing.
Well, I mean, he followed the greatest, and I think he followed the legend. He followed the greatest, and he did get a bit of a raw deal. I agree with you, on that. So now this, I mean, again, and I'm not just saying this. I mean, again, this is like every time you turn a page, it's one interesting, anecdote fact about your life. So maybe when we do the movie, maybe I could play the Georgetown trainer. But so now, like, if you had to look back on it, who was the single greatest player in your time with the Johnnies?
That I played with or against?
That you played with.
Oh, on that team, the most dominant player was Sean L. Scott because of his post play. He ended up playing in the NBA. But the most talented player, and this might go unnoticed, was Rashawn McLeod. Rashawn McLeod was a Jersey City kid. He played for Bobby Hurley. He played there for 2 years. Rashawn didn't miss a shot. And he was 6'8", and he could shoot the three. And back then, 4 men were underneath the basket. So they kind of pigeonholed him to be like this 4-man. And he was a freshman. And Rashawn McLeod was so talented. Oh, my God. He didn't miss. So Rashawn he left after 2 years and transferred to Duke. He was one of the few guys that ever transferred to Duke because he played for Hurley. Coach K loved Hurley, obviously. And then Rashawn played in the NBA. So Rashawn McLeod, even though he was just a freshman, there were a lot of talented guys. We had R.J. Barrett's father on our team named Rowan.
Yeah, Rowan Barrett, from Canada.
Oh, he was so athletic. I couldn't believe how high this guy jumped. He played on the Canadian national team with Steve Nash in '96. What a great talent. So many guys played in Europe.
David Kane, I guess he became a Rucker. He went up to the Rucker League, right? He was like, he was a street ball player, I guess, right?
David Kane was the senior captain of the team when I was a junior, and David Kane is the greatest leader I've ever seen on a court. I got to watch them a lot that year. He knew exactly where to put the ball for every point that was scored. His nickname was the director, and he would go up to Rucker and he ran the show up there.
Yeah.
I love Dave. I just saw DC and Shawnell at the Big East tournament. They're still best friends.
Yeah. I mean, and those teams back there, like a lot, and yet, like you said, on recruits, you had in the book you mentioned Zendon Hamilton, you had Felipe Lopez, still New York players, and still looking to come to St. John's. So, what
a time that year! I mean, think about the UConn team we played against. It was Donyell Marshall and Ray Allen was a freshman.
Yeah.
So Ray Allen, he came off the bench on that team. That was amazing. Today he'd be their leading scorer. We're playing Seton Hall. Seton Hall's still loaded. Then you got Villanova was good. Syracuse had Lawrence Moten, who seemingly never missed a shot. The teams were just stacked with talent, and there was a lot of New York City guys still playing at St. John's, which was a really cool. That was something Louis Carnesecca really cultivated. He wanted guys that wanted to stay home. You're going to play at Madison Square Garden. That's why Shawnell Scott there. His mom would get right on the train, take the 2 or the 3 down to the Garden, and they'd be there in 20 minutes for a Garden game. It was beautiful for them. And just really that time period was in the Big East just magical.
And just with the success that the team had this year, Pitino talked about it, and then Jerry alluded to it in another episode. We interviewed Simeon Wilcher's father, who ended up, I guess, transferring to Texas. But he said, the Subway alumni. And one thing about St. John's, it was the story for a while. I mean, and that's why I kind of discovered you, just doing research for the show and for guests. So that Subway alumni. But talk a little bit about this season and this year with the Johnnies, and then their success that they're having.
Jimmy, I'm having the feeling like I had in 1985 right now about this team. You are locked in. I know the guys are transferring in and out, and I get that. That's a part of the game today that we didn't grow up with. We don't understand that, but it's a part of the game. But I'm locked in. I mean, I can't get season tickets because I'm coaching over here at Hills West. But when you look at these teams playing, like this past year, to look at a guy like Zuby got so much better from the time he walked onto campus till now, and that's all Pitino. What Pitino has done is made instant credibility. And when he got hired, when he got Louis' blessing, everybody went nuts. And what he's done in just 2 years, like the Subway alumni, people are coming out of the woodwork. And when you go to a St. John's game, it's a lot more older people our age than it is young kids. They have a great student section, but the people that are there in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and we're yearning. We're doing anything to go back to that time period. I'll never forget watching one of my first games I ever watched was Boo Harvey, who played at St. John's in '80.
There's a name.
Yeah.
Boo Harvey was amazing. Boo Harvey made a shot to win a game against DePaul, I think it was at the Garden. It was the first game I went to with my dad. And I was like, wow, this guy is awesome. And then, you get to follow them throughout their career. This current team, the one that's coming in, is loaded with talent. I hope that kid Sinan doesn't go to the pros. I hope he stays at St. John's and plays another year. Everyone he seemed like he's picked has been a 40% three-point shooter or more. I think he's going back to that Kentucky formula that he had back in the day when he had Jamal Mashburn from the Bronx, a big guy who could shoot. You're going to take some other players from all across the country that are all shooting 40% from three. He wasn't happy with the way they shot the three this year. I get it. That was Pitino's thing going back to Providence in '87 with Billy Donovan. But I am locked in. And a lot of people our age are locked into this team, this program. And Jerry, let me go back to your point from before. And you said it twice already. I've written the screenplay. The screenplay is done. I'm shopping it around right now. The name of it is called the Walk-on. I'm sending it out to people. I sent it to Eddie Burns. I sent it to a couple of people that kind of knew someone in Hollywood. So far, I haven't gotten any leaks. I haven't gotten any leads, but I'm going to tell you, just like my basketball career, I don't quit. I'm competitive. I want to get this made because, Jerry, I agree with you. It's something that we can all look back on and we can all kind of sympathize with. Someone who didn't make their team, someone who got cut, someone who won't quit. I had one person said, it sounds like the Rudy story. It sounds like we've heard so many stories like that. I said, when's the last story like that? Give it to me. Come on. I haven't heard anything lately. Rudy came out the month I made the team at St. John's. I haven't heard another story like that. There's a whole 2 generations. There's millennials and Generation Z who don't know anything about Rudy and wouldn't know where to start to look for it. But there is a market for it. I believe there's a market for it. And Jimmy, like you said, with the St. John's revival, maybe that gives it a little bit of a kickstart and a little bit of a credibility. I'm really passionate about it. My wife thinks I'm absolutely nuts, which is fine, but I have it written.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I'm going to keep going, and I don't care. I could get 100 no's. I don't care. I only need one.
Yeah, so you just need the one yes. But we really didn't even touch about your career at Half Hollow High West because, I mean, to coach a player like Tobias Harris. And I also put up the one book I have up here is Pat Riley's biography. You alluded to that in your book, The Disease of Me. And I actually, Dan Hurley mentioned that was a book that kind of got him out of the shallows when he was at Seton Hall. I guess the nun gave it to him, The Disease of Me. So I have that book up there. Actually a signed copy by Pat Riley. So, but I think you had a team nationally ranked. So just, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I don't take much more of your time, but just talk a little bit about, because you had an opportunity to coach Tobias, who is in the NBA. You also had Tavon Sledge, who was a recruit. Emil Blackman, whose nephew was, was Mark Jackson's nephew. So, but and my producer Dave just said something. I think he works with somebody. So,
yes, he did.
I have been very lucky to work in the Half Hollow Hills School District. It's in Suffolk County on Long Island. Half Hollow Hills is in a town called Dix Hills. It's a big community. There's 2 high schools. I work at High School West. And when I got the social studies teaching job here in 99, they were looking for a basketball coach. So it was but you know how I got that job? Because at the bottom of my resume, Brian Mahoney put me on a team, and I scored 1 point at St. John's. I didn't score fouls. I scored 1 point. And it says Dean's List member of the St. John's Redmen. My principal read that and said, get over here. You're hired. And that was it. And I was able to teach. And in my first couple of coaching years, I wasn't very good. I'll be honest with you. My first 5 years, I made the playoffs once, and I had good talent. I had a kid that ended up playing in the NFL for 10 years, a guy named Stephen Bowen. He was a Division I basketball recruit as well. And I didn't get in the playoffs with him. So I had to look in the mirror. And the book that I read that got me out of my funk was The Miracle of St. Anthony by Adrian Wojnarowski and Bobby Hurley. And it was that book changed my entire coaching career. I haven't missed a playoff since. It's all about accountability. It's about holding the kids to a standard and keeping them to that standard. It's about competing at everything you do. And every video I watched right before the season is all Bobby Hurley. It's all Coach Hurley with his drills, his philosophy. And at the same time as I got my philosophy, and I had actually Coach Graffam came down from Maine and gave me a little tutorial about how we ran our pressure defense and put that all together. Tobias Harris is now a freshman in my school. I get the pleasure of coaching him for 4 years. He was together with a great group of athletes. We go 23-2 when he's a sophomore. He averages 29 points a game. We win the first county championship in school history. 2 years later, we go and we are nationally ranked. We beat, in the same year, we beat the state champion of Connecticut, the state champion of Pennsylvania. We beat Bishop Loughlin from Brooklyn and Christ the King from Queens in the same year. And we became 18th in the country in USA Today. Now, I'm not a big rankings guy, but 19th in the country was St. Anthony of Jersey City. I was one above I said, I'm framing that. I will never.
Yeah.
That's better than, who knows.
Yeah.
But to be in the same list with Coach Hurley and to have Tobias Harris, and we went all the way upstate. We had a great season. We were 25-1. I had Tobias, who was an NBA player. His brother Tyler now plays in Qatar. He's on the Qatari national team, who qualified for the Olympics, which is a great story. Tavon Sledge, which you mentioned, was a point guard, 5'8", who could dunk on people. And then we had Emil Blackman, who's a sophomore, who ended up playing 4 years at Niagara and Duquesne. Emil Blackman's the greatest dunker in Long Island history, and his uncle was Mark Jackson, and they look identical. It's really weird. But it's amazing how it worked. That those 4 guys on my one team, the year after Tobias graduates, we go back upstate again and lose to Mount Vernon upstate. The program since then has just been going upward. We got kids moving in from all over the country to play here because the academics are just as good as the athletics here. And that's when parents see a nice community. The team that I had last year were the most wonderful children you've ever had. You'd want all of them to be a part of your family. We had a decent year. We made the playoffs like we always do. But I love it here. I love Hills West basketball. I will love to finish my career here, coaching and teaching. It's just a great place. But I was really lucky to coach some great players. So this is a quick story about Tobias. They're playing the Knicks in the playoffs this year when he's on the Pistons. And the guys on the TV set are saying, he's the defensive stopper. And he's guarding Karl Anthony Towns, and he's doing a great job. Now, Tobias in high school was anything but a defensive stopper. And he knew that. And he said, Coach, can you believe it? I finally listened to you,
Yeah.
And it was so nice to hear. He's 32 years old. He just had a little boy. He's married, just had a little boy. And now he's saying he's the defensive stopper. And he did a great job on Towns. And what a turnaround for the Pistons. They lost 28 straight to end the year last year. And now they took the Knicks to 5 games.
Yeah.
What a great turnaround.
Yeah, they look good. They look good. But listen, Coach, I usually close that with Jerry, but I'll just grab the book. I mean, it's The Last Redmen. It's a memoir of a walk-on. And you wrote it back in 2018. I know the world changed a little bit, but sorry, I lost you there for a second. But 2018. But listen, it's a great book, and thanks for the stories, and it's really great. I mean, we usually have it usually 35-40 minutes, but you gave us really a lot of information. Good luck, and if you need anything, and just hang on after the episode, because I think my producer wants to just touch base with you, just to help you out a little bit. But Jerry, why don't you close this one out? But this is produced by Chop Sports Media, Dave Sturcio. So Jerry, I'll close it out with you. So why don't you take this episode away?
Billy, again, thanks for coming on. It was a real joy for us. The stories are, outstanding. We wish you nothing but the best. Like Jimmy said, we just want to pass some information along to you when the episode is over. But again, as a Georgetown fan, it's always nice to have a St. John's guy come on the program. Yeah. We wish you nothing but the best, with the project going forward, with you as a coach, and and to your boys going forward. I'm sure you'll be happy to get back at Summer League before you know it. And with that being said, we're going to close out this episode. Another fantastic guest, Billy, number 31, the last walk-on. We'll see everyone soon. Thanks for joining us. Take care, everyone.
All right. Take care, Billy.
Thank you.